doesn't the NRA have to answer for all the school shootings?
Well, it could be like the fact that people like me exist, that the NRA actually formed to arm Southern blacks after the Civil War.
That would be a really good story if it was true. The NRA was not formed to defend black people from the KKK and Democrats in the South after the Civil War. And we know this because that is mentioned nowhere in the history of the NRA supplied by the NRA. The NRA was formed after the Civil War, but it was formed to support the sport of shooting, not anything to do with racial segregation, protecting slavery, or preventing lynchings. In fact, when the NRA was formed, it wasn't even in the South, where it could have done things like form groups to protect people of color from lynchings. The NRA formed in New York and New Jersey, and for quite a while, that's all it was. In fact, the NRA didn't even take a stand on the Second Amendment until 1934, and at that time, all it was doing was handing out literature. It wasn't until 1975 that the NRA even took a stance on actively lobbying about the Second Amendment. Except for 2 times prior to that history, one in the 1920s and 30s when the NRA helped draft gun control legislation against concealed carry in response to an uptick of what they saw as violence among Italian immigrants. And this was during a time in which Italians were not considered white. And then in the 1960s, they helped pass the Mulford Act in California in response to the Black Panthers starting carrying guns. And the views of the NRA and people of color in gun rights can be seen in the modern day, with Kenneth Walker and Philando Castile. I will show you the NRA statement on Kenneth Walker, a man who used his legally possessed gun to return fire on what he thought were unlawful intruders into his home. They didn't release a statement on it, at all. An organization that promotes that the Second Amendment is for defending yourself against a tyrannical government did not issue a statement when a black man returned fire on plainclothes police officers conducting a no-knock warrant into his home. You know, a tyrannical government. But the statement for Mr. Castile is even worse, until an NRA spokesperson took to Twitter and blamed it on Mr. Castile. The NRA, who advocates that background checks are an invasion of his Second Amendment rights, also advocated that a black man who possessed marijuana should not be able to carry his gun. The same organization that says the Second Amendment is all you need for lawful carry states that a black man was not lawfully carrying. A man who simply reached to his pocket under the instructions of law enforcement to get his ID, who was shot and killed for that, they state was responsible for his own death. By the way, that last tweet is not taught in their classes. They don't teach to have the permit out when the officer arrives. They teach to wait for the officer's instructions, like in Mr. Castile's case. But just like the Civil War, modern-day racists are going to attempt to rewrite history.